What happens when poverty, government aid, economic dependence, and recession collide? You get a ticking time bomb, and in some US states, that clock is already getting louder. As the national economy hangs by a thread, the warning signs are becoming impossible to ignore. Soaring poverty levels, crumbling infrastructure, surging welfare dependency, and entire regions just barely staying afloat. This isn't some distant prediction. It's the harsh reality already unfolding in parts of America. In this countdown, we're revealing the 10 states most at risk of collapse if a severe recession strikes. These are places where a single economic downturn could trigger a full-blown crisis. States held together by fragile finances, outdated industries, and federal support that may not last forever. Think your state is in the clear? You might want to think again. Today, we're not spotlighting the strong and stable. We're focusing on the ones sinking deeper into economic quicksand. Let's dive in. Starting at number 10, we have Alaska. Alaska may be stunning and untamed, but economically, it's walking a tightrope. The state's financial stability is shakier than a moose on black ice. Known as the last frontier, Alaska leans almost entirely on oil revenue to keep its economy afloat. When oil prices drop, it's not just a bump in the road, it's a full-on economic breakdown. Alaska's economy is a three-legged stool, and oil is one of those legs. Kick it out, and the whole thing collapses. Roughly 85% of the state's general fund comes from oil and gas production. So when crude prices dive, Alaska goes into full crisis mode. Think massive budget shortfalls, emergency legislative sessions, and critical services getting slashed. Back in 2015 to 2017, during a major oil price crash, Alaska faced a multi-billion-dollar deficit. The state had to tap into its emergency savings, the Alaska Permanent Fund, a fund meant to safeguard future generations. But those withdrawals? They're starting to look more like bailouts than backup plans. And that fund won't last forever. It gets worse. Oil production in Alaska has been in decline for decades. The once booming North Slope isn't what it used to be. So not only is Alaska vulnerable when oil prices fall, but it's producing less oil in the first place. That's like getting a pay cut and losing your job on the same day. Ouch. The fallout? Constant threats of government shutdowns, layoffs of state workers, stalled infrastructure, and rural towns unsure if they'll have heat or electricity next winter. And here's the kicker. Nearly a third of Alaska's GDP comes from government spending, much of it from Washington. If federal aid slows down, the situation could go from bad to catastrophic. When oil prices tumble, Alaska doesn't just cut spending. It misplaces the entire budget playbook. At number 9, Louisiana. Sure, Louisiana brings you jazz, gumbo, and Mardi Gras, but that's the highlight reel. Peel back the festive layers, and you'll find a state held together with budget gaps, borrowed time, and a whole lot of wishful thinking. Over 18% of Louisianans live below the poverty line. That's not just a number, it's a red flag waving in the wind. Across many parishes, infrastructure is decaying. Hospitals are short on staff, and good-paying jobs are disappearing faster than crawfish at a summer boil. The backbone of Louisiana's economy? Oil and gas. Sounds profitable, right? But it's more like gambling your mortgage on a roulette wheel. Every time there's a hiccup in the global market, Louisiana takes a punch straight to the gut. A dip in oil prices or a slowdown in international demand can wipe out thousands of jobs in a flash. The state's deep reliance on unstable industries leaves it exposed to economic shocks with no safety net in place. And as if that's not enough, Louisiana faces the constant stream of natural and industrial disasters: hurricanes, floods, chemical plant accidents. Each one takes another chunk out of an already struggling economy and an overburdened emergency response system. Then there's education. Louisiana ranks near the bottom nationally, and that's a major problem for building a future-proof workforce. The result? A steady brain drain. Young, talented people pack up and leave, and what remains is a system on life support. If a national recession hits, Louisiana won't just be hurting, it could become the face of total economic collapse. The Federal Emergency Management Agency would be on speed dial. Levees might give way economically. And literally, in the Mardi Gras beads, they'll be traded in for pink slips and unemployment forms. The party may be iconic, but without serious change, it's about to end, and no amount of voodoo magic can stop the freefall. At number 8, we have Michigan. Detroit usually grabs the spotlight with empty skyscrapers, abandoned blocks, and the occasional headline about a downtown comeback. But let's not pretend the Motor City is the only place in Michigan showing wear and tear. Across the state, you'll find neighborhoods with boarded-up windows, roads that feel more like obstacle courses, and communities stuck in the shadow of better days. Michigan was once the pride of American manufacturing, the engine that built the middle class. Cars, factories, jobs, this place was the blueprint for prosperity. Fast forward to today, and nearly 40% of Michigan residents are living under financial strain. We're talking maxed out credit cards, late payments, rising bankruptcies, and constant stress just to stay afloat. Politicians love to talk about shiny tech hubs in Ann Arbor or Grand Rapids because nothing says progress like an app for dog yoga. But let's be honest, most folks in Michigan aren't launching startups. In places like Flint, Saginaw, and Pontiac, people are watching their communities unravel. Schools lack funding, stores shut down, and access to healthcare is hit or miss. And hope? It's becoming a rare commodity. The real danger lies in how tethered Michigan still is to the auto industry. Sure, there's been some diversification, but the reality is if car sales take a dip, supply chains choke up, or tariffs hit the wrong note, it's a domino effect. One rough quarter at Ford or GM, and you're looking at massive layoffs. Another wave of foreclosures, and towns bracing for impact. To be fair, there's some light on the horizon. Automakers like Volkswagen are shifting more production to the US, partly due to tariffs. That could be a win for places like Michigan, if those jobs land there. But right now, that's more of a hope than a plan. Michigan isn't just rebuilding, it's still recovering from the last economic collapse, and it's holding it together with duct tape and determination. When the next recession rolls in, it won't just bruise this state, it could send it spiraling into full-blown economic chaos. At number 7, Illinois. On the surface, Illinois looks solid. Bustling cities, iconic skylines, Fortune 500 headquarters, and vibe that says, we've got this covered. But take a closer look, and what you'll find is one of the deepest financial sinkholes in America. Sure, Illinois is home to Chicago, an economic powerhouse filled with innovation, industry, and more sports teams than you can count. But here's the catch. The state is drowning in debt, thanks in large part to one of the worst-funded pension systems in the country. We're talking over $211 billion in unfunded liabilities. That's not a rounding error. That's an economic time bomb waiting for the smallest tremor to blow everything wide open. And how does the state deal with it? By hiking taxes again and again. Property taxes in Illinois rank among the highest in the nation. But instead of better roads, schools, and services, residents get potholes, aging public transit, underfunded education, and a budget that always seems to be one step away from collapse. It's like paying for a VIP experience and getting stuck behind a pillar in the nosebleeds. No surprise, then, people are leaving. Illinois has seen a population decline for 10 years straight. Residents are loading up U-Hauls like there's a natural disaster on the way. And honestly, in parts of Chicago like the South Side or some West Side neighborhoods, it does feel like a crisis zone. Violent crime, economic hardship, and failing infrastructure are the norm, not the exception. Now, to be fair, let's talk transit. I've ridden Chicago's trains a few times, not perfect. But they do their job. Outdated? Definitely. Could use some TLC? For sure, but the people are decent, and the trains mostly run on time. Still, like everything else in the state, it's running on borrowed time. And here's the scary part. Chicago, the so-called economic engine of the Midwest, is lugging around a debt burden that could topple a small country. The city's own pension issues mirror the state's. Public services are stretched to the limit, and rising crime makes it a tough sell for families looking to put down roots. If a national recession hits, Illinois won't just feel the pinch, it'll unravel. This isn't just a small crack in the wall. It's structural failure. Plain and simple, Illinois might look steady on the outside, but underneath, the whole foundation is crumbling. Coming at number 6, Mississippi. Mississippi isn't just struggling, it's bottom of the barrel by both US and global standards. The median household income ranks dead last, with nearly a quarter of the population living in poverty and in some rural counties. That number hits 35%. This isn't short-term hardship, it's generational poverty with no clear way out. Just over half of working-age adults are even in the workforce. And it's not because they're living off trust funds, it's because jobs are scarce, and the ones that exist often pay too little to survive, let alone thrive. Infrastructure? Falling apart. Roads and water systems are crumbling. In some towns, people still boil water daily. Even Jackson, the state capital, went weeks in 2022 without clean, running water. Schools are outdated, underfunded, and literally crumbling. And healthcare? A disaster. Dozens of rural hospitals have shut down or cut services. Terrible news for a state with the highest obesity, diabetes, and infant mortality rates in the country. Then there's the brain drain. Young, educated people leave the state the moment they can because there are no real opportunities to stay. No industries, no innovation, no future. Mississippi's economy leans heavily on agriculture, low-wage labor, and federal aid. So when the national economy takes a hit, Mississippi doesn't just suffer, it teeters on collapse. And truthfully, it's been close for a long time. Coming in at number 5, we have Nevada. Nevada might look like it's cashing in, especially with the bright lights of Vegas, but underneath glitz is an economy balancing on a roulette wheel. Over 25% of the workforce is tied to hospitality and entertainment, great when times are good, but a total nightmare when the economy takes a dip. There's no state income tax, which sounds amazing until you realize that also means fewer funds for things like schools, hospitals, and basic public services. Just ask anyone who lived through the 2008 housing crash. And Nevada was ground zero. If history repeats itself, we're talking shuttered casinos, layoffs, and ghost town vibes all over again. Right now, things look solid. Tourism is up, casinos are packed, and tax revenue is rolling in. But this state is one downturn away from disaster. Sure, there are a decent number of government jobs helping to stabilize things, but with ongoing cuts to the federal workforce, even that safety net is looking shaky, military jobs aside. At number 4, Kentucky. Kentucky is one of those states that stays under the radar, never quite bad enough to dominate the headlines, but rarely good enough to land on a best of list either. And honestly, talk to the locals, and it feels like that's just how they prefer it. But just because Kentucky isn't making national news doesn't mean it isn't struggling. Jobs have vanished, infrastructure is falling apart, and many residents rely on federal assistance to get by. Nearly 22% of the population lives below the poverty line, and some areas haven't seen real economic growth since the days of VHS tapes. The opioid crisis didn't just touch Kentucky. It tore right through it. In some rural counties, overdose rates are worse than what you'd see in developing nations. And with rural hospitals closing and mental health services disappearing, families are left to pick up the pieces on their own. Tech jobs? Innovation? Those are nearly non-existent here. Schools are underfunded. Opportunities are rare, and progress, when it happens, is slow and fragile. So, what happens when the national economy tanks? Kentucky won't just stumble, it'll hit the ground hard. Federal dollars holding things together will dry up, and whatever gains the state has made over the years could vanish overnight. Kentucky's barely hanging on now. A real recession could be the final blow. Number 3, Arkansas. Arkansas rarely makes headlines, and that's exactly the problem. While it quietly stays off the national radar, much of the state is sinking deeper into economic struggle. Now, let's be fair. Northwest Arkansas is a different story. You've got good jobs, developed towns, and major industries, but one thriving corner isn't enough to carry the rest of the state. It's like having one strong lifeboat on a sinking ship. Roughly 18% of Arkansans live in poverty. Much of the state is rural, disconnected, and underserved. Healthcare access is spotty. Education outcomes rank among the lowest in the country, and broadband internet is still hit or miss. The workforce leans heavily on low-paying jobs in agriculture, retail, and manufacturing, industries that don't hold up well when the economy dives. Arkansas is also heavily dependent on federal aid. In some counties, government programs are the only thing keeping the lights on. If federal support dries up, entire communities could go dark, literally and economically. Coming in at number 2, Alabama. Alabama is proud, rooted in tradition, and tough as nails. But pride doesn't pay the bills, and it doesn't fix broken systems. The state ranks near the bottom in critical areas like healthcare, education, and broadband access. When the national economy dips, Alabama doesn't just feel it, it crumbles. Over 16% of its population lives below the poverty line, and in many rural areas, the infrastructure is falling apart. Wages? A lot of jobs still pay like it's 1995, not 2025. What makes things worse is the razor-thin margin for error. Alabama's economy isn't diverse, its safety nets are minimal, and federal funding props up way too many essential services. If that support gets cut or the economy stumbles, things can fall apart fast. Sure, Alabama has grit and determination, but grit without resources just turns into struggle. And if the next recession hits hard, Alabama might not just slip, it could be decades before it finds the way back. Finally, at number 1, we have West Virginia. West Virginia is the canary in America's economic coal mine, literally. When coal collapsed, so did half the state's economy. And nothing ever replaced it. No tech boom, no industry revival, just boarded up shops, abandoned homes, and, for sale, signs collecting dust. It has the lowest workforce participation rate in the country. Nearly half the working age population isn't working, or even looking. That's not a labor shortage, it's an economic flatline. Healthcare? Worst overdose death rate in the nation, crumbling rural hospitals, and chronic illness rates off the charts. Education? Severely underfunded. Infrastructure? Even running water and reliable internet aren't guaranteed. Almost a third of the state budget comes from federal aid. So, when a national recession hits and that aid dries up, it won't just be a tough time. Schools, hospitals, and public services could all collapse. West Virginia isn't waiting for the next recession, it's already living it in slow motion. And if things get worse nationally, this state might not get back up. And that wraps up our video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to smash that like button. Thanks for watching. Take care, be kind, and I'll see you next time.